The freight terminal breathes in slow cycles. Metal, water, light that never warms. Forklifts drift past like they're half asleep. Radios chatter, then cut out. A charity logo slides by on white paint. Too clean for this yard. A leash moves. Then stops. The dog's body goes rigid without warning. Not curiosity, not training. A hard refusal. A low sound starts in his chest. He doesn't look around. He fixes on one seam of steel. The handler doesn't speak. He just shortens the lead by 2 fingers. Somewhere, a door closes, too softly. The dog barks once, and the night changes shape. The freight terminal never really slept. It just changed rhythms. By day, the coastal yard clanged and roared, cranes swinging, forklifts beeping, radios cracking with clipped instructions. At night, the noise thinned into something more skeletal and eerie. Steel tracks hummed under distant engines. Container stacks loomed like dark apartment towers. Sodium lights reflected in long puddles, turning rainwater into strips of molten orange. Officer Ethan Cole moved through it all with K9's Shadow at his side. Shadow's claws clicked lightly on the wet concrete, his black and tan coat catching little halos of light as they passed each lamp. The dog's vest read police in reflective letters that flashed every time a train's headlight swept by. Ethan scanned the rows of cars, the towers of metal boxes, the tiny details people who didn't live in this world never noticed. Broken seals, sloppy welds, fresh scuff marks where there shouldn't be any. Most nights, the job was methodical, even boring. Tonight was supposed to be one of those nights. Medical relief, lot 12 through 18. Deputy Lucas Reed called, reading from a tablet as he jogged to catch up. His breath puffed in little white clouds. All cleared on scan. Captain says we're just babysitting paperwork at this point. Ethan gave a small, non-committal grunt. Paperwork doesn't sniff for a living. Shadow's ears flicked at his voice. The dog didn't look bored. He rarely did. His head moved like a radar dish, sampling the air currents between cars. Ethan trusted that nose more than he trusted half the hardware in the terminal. They turned a corner into a lane where a newly arrived train waited on the tracks, its containers stacked too high. Big white letters flashed across the sides of several cars. Global Relief Alliance. Emergency Medical Support. Logos of red crosses and blue globes stared back at them like they were beyond suspicion. Lucas whistled softly. Disaster shipment from the floods in the south. News has been all over it. The captain's going to love the optics on this one fast relief through our port. No delays. Yeah, Ethan said. As long as what's inside matches the paint job. He gave Shadow a brief hand signal. The dog stepped closer to the line of containers, nose lifting, tail level. Ethan fell into an easy rhythm, walking parallel to the train while Shadow traced an invisible zigzag of scent. On Lucas's tablet, green check marks glowed. Radiation scan, clear. Chemical scan, clear. Heat signature, normal. Manifest signed and verified. Lucas recited. Honestly, I don't know why we're... Shadow stopped. It wasn't a, hey, something's interesting kind of stop. It was sudden, absolute, as if someone had hit an invisible brake. His body went rigid. The fur along his spine rose in a subtle line. A low sound started in his chest. Not yet a bark, more like a warning that was still deciding how loud it needed to be. Ethan felt it like a ripple down the leash. He looked at the container Shadow faced. Same relief logo. Same white paint. Same clean barcode the scanners had already loved. Lucas, Ethan said quietly. Which car is this? Lucas checked the side number, squinting in the sodium glare. 17. Manifest says sealed pallets of IV fluid and antibiotics. All temp stable. Everything's fine, man. Shadow's probably catching residual from the yard. Shadow's low sound grew into a full bark, sharp and resonant in the narrow lane. One, then another, then a volley. He stepped closer to the doors, nose pressed near the lock, whole body leaning forward like gravity had shifted. Ethan's shoulders tensed. He doesn't, probably, anything. A man in a fluorescent vest came striding down the lane, annoyance written all over his face. Hey! the freight supervisor shouted. You can't hold those relief cars. We're on a clock here. NGO wants them out by dawn. Ethan didn't look away from Shadow. We need a manual check on this container. The supervisor threw up his hands. You've already got the scans. Chemical clean, radiation clean, weight matches manifest. You really want the headline to be Police Delay, Disaster Aid? Lucas cast Ethan a sideways glance. The political math was obvious. Ethan felt it pressing against him like the damp night air. Shadow barked again, louder this time, then let out a frustrated whine that made the hair on Ethan's arm stand up. He unclipped the radio from his shoulder. Captain Hayes, this is Cole. A beat of static, then Captain Maria Hayes's voice. Calm but tired. Go ahead, Ethan. Go ahead, Ethan. Shadow's alerting on a Global Relief Alliance container. Car 17. Medical shipment tied to the southern floods. Scans are clean, but he's persistent. Persistent how? She asked. He watched Shadow pace and return, barking at the same narrow seam in the doors. He's not leaving it alone. I'm requesting authorization for a manual entry. On the other end, silence stretched. Ethan could practically hear Maria weighing news optics against the fact she knew him and knew Shadow. The supervisor muttered under his breath. This is ridiculous. Finally, Maria spoke. You're sure this isn't residual from something nearby? It is no classism. Shadow's locked in, Ethan said simply. A small exhale. Then, you have authorization. Document everything. If we're wrong, I'm going to hear about it. If we're right. She didn't finish. Yes, ma'am. The supervisor groaned. Great. Fine. But you're signing whatever delay reports come out of this. Not me. Ethan didn't bother answering. With Lucas's help, he got the seal cut and the locking bar thrown aside. As the heavy doors creaked open, a draft of stale air rolled out, humid, thick, and unmistakably human. The beam of Ethan's flashlight cut into the darkness. For half a heartbeat, the scene inside looked like just more plastic-wrapped pallets. Then the shapes moved. Faces turned toward the light. Eyes squinted. There were 5 of them, 3 men, a teenage boy, and a young woman. They were squeezed into gaps between stacks of boxes, their clothes damp, skin slick with sweat. Someone coughed, dry and ragged. Lucas swore under his breath. Oh my God! The young woman flinched at the light but stepped forward anyway, putting herself in front of the others in a protective gesture. It's okay, Ethan said quickly, lowering the beam. Police! You're safe, she answered in accented but clear English. We were told that we would be moved to shelter. Her voice trembled, but the phrasing sounded practiced. Ethan had heard that same tight, controlled note in people who'd rehearsed what they were allowed to say. Shadow didn't treat her like a threat. The dog hopped up lightly into the container, nose working furiously, then settled at her side with a soft whine, as if he'd found the epicenter of fear in the room. Ethan's stomach clenched. Lucas, he said. Get medics down here. And immigration support. Now. As Lucas hurried off, Ethan guided the migrants carefully out of the container, one by one. The young woman hesitated until the others had stepped down. When she did, he saw the lanyard around her neck, an ID badge stamped with the Global Relief Alliance logo and her photo. Name. Title. Liaison. Officer. The freight supervisor pointed at it like a smoking gun. There. Your smuggler. Happy now? The young woman's eyes flashed with something like terror. Quickly buried. Ethan ignored the jab. He took the badge gently, scanning it. We'll talk at the precinct, he said. For now you're going to get checked by medical too. Shadow stayed beside her as they walked. His body language said what he couldn't. Something's wrong, his posture insisted. But not the way you think. They loaded the migrants into 2 waiting vans, paramedics weaving in and out to check pulses and blood pressure. Space blankets crinkled in the cold air. The young woman with the liaison badge sat on the back bumper of one van, while a medic shone a light into her eyes. Shadow stayed close enough that his fur brushed her knee. Ethan watched him more than he watched her vital signs. The dog's posture was all contradiction alert, focused, but not on edge. No bared teeth. No stiff-legged aggression. Just that soft, insistent whine he reserved for injured kids, shaken witnesses, the people Ethan instinctively put on the protect side of his mental ledger. "What's your name?" Ethan asked her. She hesitated, then glanced at his badge as if taking a cue on how much truth she could afford. "You can call me Mira," she said finally. He had a feeling it wasn't the full story, but he let it sit. "Okay, Mira, you're coming with us," he said. "You'll see a doctor, get something to eat. Then we're going to talk about who put you in that box." Her jaw tightened. For a second, something like exhaustion flickered past the carefully arranged calm in her eyes. "And if I don't talk?" she asked. Shadow gave a low, unhappy sound. Ethan didn't miss the timing. "Then Shadow will keep looking until he finds the truth anyway," Ethan said quietly. "He's annoyingly good at that." For the first time, the corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile, before she looked away. The precinct's fluorescent lights made everyone look more tired than they already were. Ethan sat across from Mira in interview room 2, a small, boxy space with a metal table bolted to the floor and a camera blinking in the upper corner. Her relief badge lay between them like a piece of evidence still deciding what it wanted to be. Shadow lay at Ethan's heel, head on his paws, eyes half closed but never fully asleep. On the other side of the one-way glass, Captain Maria Hayes watched with her arms folded. Her reflection hovered faintly over the scene, dark hair pulled back, lines at the corners of her mouth deeper on long nights like this. The speaker crackled softly. Maria's voice came through. "Take your time," she said. "We've got people from immigration and social services handling the others. You focus on her." Ethan clicked the mic once in acknowledgement. "So," he began, resting his forearms on the table. "Mira, help me understand your role. This badge says you're the liaison. That's a big responsibility." She stared at the plastic rectangle as if it belonged to someone else. "It's just a word," she said. "They needed someone who could speak your language. That's all. How'd you get the job?" A beat. Her gaze flicked up, then down. "Application. Interview. Like everyone," she replied a little too quickly. On the floor, Shadow's eyebrow twitched. Ethan could feel the faintest shift in the leash under his boot. "Where?" Ethan asked. "Online listing? Flyer? Someone introduce you?" Her hands tightened in her lap. She folded and refolded her fingers. "A friend," she said. "He said they needed help. That we could start over. That's all." Behind the glass, Maria scribbled something on a legal pad. Ethan didn't push yet. He slid the badge closer to her. "This charity," he said. "Global Relief Alliance. How many shipments have you done with them?" "3," she said, then immediately corrected. "4. I mean, I don't know exactly. We're not told everything." Shadow's ear flicked. "3 or 4?" Ethan asked gently. Her shoulders rose in a small, defensive shrug. "I told you. I don't know." It would have been easy to pin her down right there, to frame it as a lie and build a neat, satisfying case with her at the center. Ethan had done that kind of work, when the pieces fit. Tonight, nothing felt neat. "You signed manifests," he said instead. "Your name's on this one. That means someone trusted you, or wanted you on the hook." Her laugh was short and humorless. "You think they trust me?" "Someone does," Ethan said. "Or someone thinks your signature is more disposable than theirs." She went still. He saw the words land, the way you see a wave hit a boat in the distance. Before she could answer, a soft knock sounded on the door. Ethan stepped out into the hall, closing it behind him. Maria waited with a tablet in hand. Beside her stood Dr. Lena Moore, her lab coat half-buttoned, dark hair pulled into a messy knot, a coffee that had long since gone cold in her hand. "What do you have?" Ethan asked. Lena's eyes were sharp, awake in a way that had nothing to do with caffeine. "I pulled every manifest tied to Global Relief Alliance through our port in the last 18 months, she said. "Then I mapped them against international disaster timelines. They show up right after every major flood, hurricane, Earthquake, she continued. But there's a pattern in how they travel. They route through intermediate ports that don't match the supposed destination, and their end location paperwork is a mess. Missing signatures, duplicate codes, manifest edits at the last minute. That could be sloppiness, Maria said. But there wasn't much conviction in it. It could, Lena agreed, if not for this. She zoomed into a cluster of entries, highlighting one code. Container 17 from tonight? That's not its first identity. I tracked the barcode back. This sticker was placed over an older code from a shipment 2 months ago. Same charity. Same freight company. Different supposed mission. Ethan's jaw tightened. So, they recycle containers and identities. More than that, Lena said. A lot of those recycled codes connect to one freight operator. Same company name buried in the paperwork. They specialize in temperature-sensitive medical transport. The phrase rang a familiar bell in Ethan's brain. That's what tonight's manifest said. Exactly, Lena said. And here's the fun part. Another train with that operator's cargo is scheduled to pass through the East Harbor suburban yard tonight. Small yard, skeleton crew. On paper, it's just transferring donated chemo drugs and insulin to clinics inland. ETA? Maria asked. 4 hours, Lena replied. Give or take. Ethan felt the night narrow around that number. Shadow alerted on the seals and the air around that container before we opened it. He said, if this operator's running a pattern people and product hidden together, there's a chance that train's just another box full of ghosts waiting to happen. Maria exhaled, pinching the bridge of her nose. We're thin as it is, she said. We've got teams on the migrants, paperwork, media already sniffing around. I know, Ethan said. But we don't get to tell the people in that next container that we were tired. Silence hung for a moment. Then Maria looked to Lena. Any indication of what else might be in those cars? Lena hesitated. If they're moving pharmaceuticals off the books to avoid regulation, they're probably not using ideal storage. Improvised heating, poor stabilization. If something leaks in a closed space with human cargo, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. Maria handed Ethan the tablet. You keep pressing, Mira, she said. If she knows anything about that next train, we need it. Fast. Back in the interview room, the air felt heavier. Mira hadn't moved much. Her shoulders had sagged slightly, like someone had let some of the tension out but forgotten to stop halfway. She looked up when Ethan came in, eyes flicking briefly to Shadow as the dog trotted back to his place beneath the table. You have a lot of paperwork, she said dully. We do, Ethan said, sitting. And it says you've done this before. She clenched her jaw, but didn't deny it. We found a pattern, he continued. This charity, this freight company, same names, different storms. Everywhere there's chaos, they're there. Containers like the one you were in show up, move fast, disappear from paper trails. She stared at him. Her eyes were too old for her face. I told you, she said. They said we were going somewhere safe. Then who is they? Ethan asked. Where do you meet them? How do they recruit people like you? How do they decide who gets put in the front with the badge and who gets shoved between pallets? Her lower lip trembled for the first time. She bit it. Hard. You think this is about a good story, she whispered. About breaking a case, getting a promotion. But you don't know what they do to people who talk. He didn't flinch. You're right. I don't, he said. Show me. She stared at him for a long moment, then slowly rolled her sleeves up. Faint bruises ringed her arms, old fingerprints in yellow and green, the kind that came from being grabbed and held where you didn't want to go. Shadow lifted his head, eyes narrowing. He didn't growl. He just watched, his gaze steady and unblinking. They tell you they're helping, Mira said softly. They find you in camps, shelters, border lines. They say they have a program, a sponsorship, work you can do to earn your place. Her accent thickened as she spoke, the polished edges scraping away. At first you just translate, she continued. You help them talk to doctors, guards, other officials. You sign things you don't understand. Then one day, they say there isn't room for everyone. That someone has to go in the container. Someone has to sit near the door, in case there are questions. Someone whose face looks less dangerous. A bitter smile twisted her mouth. Those are their words, she said. Not mine, whose face looks less dangerous. Ethan repeated quietly. And yours did. It still does, she said. That's the point. Shadow rose silently, walked around the table, and sat at her side. He leaned his shoulder gently against her leg. She went rigid, then let out a tiny, broken sound she tried to swallow. They have my brother, she blurted, the words rushing out as if the dam had finally cracked. He is 12. Back home, they showed me pictures of him walking to school, walking home. They said if I refused, he would never come home again. That no one would believe me if I went to the police, that I would be the one you put in prison. Tears spilled over, hot tracks on her cheeks. So I signed, she said. I put on their badge. I stood by the door and smiled when the customs officer looked in. I told myself I would endure it once, then twice, then maybe it would be enough. Tonight wasn't supposed to happen, she whispered. We were supposed to arrive before dawn, be moved by trucks before anyone noticed. But the train stopped here. They didn't tell us about you. About your dog. She glanced down at Shadow, whose amber eyes met hers calmly. He came to the door, she said. He barked, and I thought, it's over. They'll think I'm the smuggler. I'll go to jail, and my brother will still be alone. She wiped her face with the heel of her hand. But he didn't bite me, she said. He just stayed. Like he knew I was. Not what you think. Ethan let the quiet sit for a moment, the weight of it filling every corner of the small room. Mira, he said finally. There's another shipment, same company, scheduled to pass through a smaller yard tonight. No big city, no press. If they're doing with that train what they did with yours, there are more people like you on it. Maybe worse. Her eyes widened. For a second, Ethan saw something like calculation fear wrestling with the possibility that she wasn't alone in this nightmare. East Harbor Suburban Yard, he said. Scheduled in a few hours. Temperature-sensitive cargo. Same operator. Same charity. Her hands trembled in her lap. They like small places, she whispered. Less. Questions. What do they do with the medicine? Ethan asked. She swallowed. Sometimes it's real. Sometimes it's stolen. Sometimes it's not medicine at all. I don't know everything. They wouldn't tell me. But I heard them talk once. About what? Ethan pressed. About heaters, she said. About not letting things freeze. About timers. In case someone got curious. They said better to lose one shipment than the whole line. Can you describe who runs it? He asked. Names? Faces? Names are never real, she said. Faces change. The only thing that's always the same is the logo, the charity, and the way they talk about people. How's that? Ethan asked. Like, wait, she said. Like they're just numbers on a manifest. Not lives. Shadow leaned his head lightly on her knee. She let her fingers rest in his fur, as if anchoring herself. Ethan stood. Mira, I'm not promising this will be easy, he said. But if you help us stop that train, we'll treat you as a witness, as someone they used, not the mastermind. She laughed again, softer this time. You think your courts will care? I can't speak for courts yet, he said. But I can speak for this room, for this department, and for my partner, who seems to think you're worth saving. She looked down at Shadow, then up at Ethan. What do you need? She asked. The storm rolled in just before midnight. By the time Ethan, Lucas, and Shadow stepped out of the SUV at East Harbor Suburban Yard, rain was falling in cold, slanted sheets. The yard was a fraction of the size of the city terminal. A handful of tracks, a squat brick office, a few yellow lamps buzzing like tired fireflies. A yard worker met them with a reflective vest and a hood pulled tight. You're the K9 unit? He shouted over the rumble of distant thunder. Coal, right? They said you wanted access to Line 3? That's right, Ethan said. Train from the coastal hub. Temperature-sensitive medical cargo. Should be here any minute, the worker said, glancing nervously up the tracks. We don't usually see cops out here in this kind of weather. Something we should be worried about? Ethan looked down at Shadow, then back. That depends on what's in those containers. Lucas checked his watch. We've got a small perimeter team from patrol on the way, he said. Captain Hayes says if we need more, we'll get them. But we're the tip of the spear. Just how I like it, Ethan muttered. In his ear, Maria's voice crackled through the radio. Cole, we're monitoring the rail controls, she said. Dispatch confirms the train's on approach. Lena's feeding what she knows about the operator to the detectives back here. You have green light for manual inspections based on probable cause. Thunder rolled again, closer this time. Moments later, the distant glow of headlights cut through the rain. The train's horn echoed off the low buildings as it rolled into the yard, brakes squealing softly. It looked like any other freight run containers stacked, logos painted, graffiti scrawled along some of the older cars. The yard worker pointed. We'll switch it to Line 3, he said. But you've only got so much time before we have to move it along. Schedules don't like to wait. People in boxes don't like waiting either, Ethan said. Do what you can. As the train eased to a clanking stop, Shadow went from calm trot to a focused, almost predatory glide. He moved ahead of Ethan, nose low, tail level, tracing the invisible river of scent pouring off metal and rain. They started with the cars that matched the manifest's exactly Global Relief logos, the same charity markings. Shadow sniffed, circled, and moved on. No agitation, no bark, just that efficient, searching motion. Lucas jogged alongside. He's not even pausing, he said. Maybe this is a bust. Maybe they knew we were onto them and routed the real cargo somewhere else. Maybe, Ethan said. Shadow's leash pulled gently to the left. Or maybe we're not in the right place yet. Shadow led them past two more marked cars, then veered sharply between stacks toward a darker edge of the yard where the lamps didn't quite reach. The tracks here curved behind a row of maintenance sheds, half in shadow, half in the washed-out glow of a solitary floodlight. There, sitting on a spur as if it had simply been forgotten, was a single line of containers with mismatched colors and patchy paint. No charity logos, no cheerful slogans about relief. One container, midpoint on the line, had a sloppy smear of white paint where some previous marking had been obscured. Its seals didn't match the neat, uniform hardware on the others. They were cheap, mismatched, like someone had scrambled to secure it without the right tools. Shadow stopped in front of it. The change in him was immediate. His whole body went taut. He inhaled deeply, then backed up a step, barking once sharp, emphatic, a verbal exclamation point in the rain. This one, Ethan said. The yard worker caught up, panting. That's not on my primary list, he said. It was added late. The manifest just says overflow medical. Of course it does, Lucas muttered. Ethan keyed his radio. Hayes, we've got an unlisted container with altered markings and K9 alert, he said. We're at the back spur, north side, requesting permission to breach. You've got it, Maria said immediately. Perimeter's almost in place around the yard. Keep me posted. Copy. They moved fast. Bolt cutters bit through the cheap metal seals with a crunch. As they worked, Ethan noticed movement at the far side of the yard, two figures near the transfer office, silhouettes lit by a doorway glow, watching. One slipped back inside. Eyes on the east side, Ethan said quietly. Could be nothing. Could be someone about to run. I'll keep an eye, Lucas said, tugging the second seal free. The lock came off with a clack. Ethan shared a look with Lucas, then they pulled the doors open. The smell hit first. It was a thick chemical tang layered over sweat, fear, and stale air. The beams from their flashlights cut through the dim interior, revealing faces, more of them this time. 10, 12, maybe more, huddled in cramped spaces between crude shelving units. On those shelves, plastic containers of various sizes were strapped into place with ratchet straps. Some were labeled in foreign languages, others bore no markings at all. Wires snaked along the racks toward the back corner, where a cluster of cheap space heaters hummed, radiating uncomfortable heat. Shadow barked, then immediately switched to that frantic, circling pattern Ethan knew too well. He darted between clusters of people, sniffing their hands and faces, then pushed deeper toward the back underside of the shelving. "Get them out," Ethan said. "Now." Lucas and the yard worker moved fast, guiding people out, helping them down if their legs buckled. Some coughed violently as the marginally fresher air hit them. Ethan followed Shadow. The dog stopped at a tangle of wires, leading to a small metal box bolted to the floor. A digital timer glowed faintly behind a plastic cover, its numbers counting down in red. Shadow barked directly at it, then backed up, hackles raised. "Bomb squad, we're not," Lucas said, blanching when he saw it. "Doesn't matter," Ethan said. "We don't need full disarm. We need stopgap and distance." He keyed his radio again. "Hayes, we've got a timer device wired to space heaters under unstable chemicals and human cargo," he said. "Countdown is 3 minutes, 12 seconds. Repeat 3 minutes, 12. Maria swore audibly over the channel. "Lena's on the line," she said. Another voice crackled in, slightly tinny. Dr. Lena Moore patched through from the precinct. "Ethan, what exactly do you see?" Lena asked. "Describe it." "Metal junction box, cheap wiring, digital timer, heaters plugged through it. No obvious secondary devices, but I'm not about to start snipping wires at random." "How many people still inside?" she pressed. "Working on it," Ethan said, glancing back. Lucas had 2 migrants in his arms, guiding them toward the door. The yard worker shepherded more. "Maybe 4 left, plus us." Shadow barked again, the sound bouncing around the container like an alarm bell. 2 minutes 45, Ethan said. Lena's voice stayed surprisingly steady. "Okay," she said. "Those heaters, are their plugs all running through the box? Or do you see direct wall connections?" Ethan scanned the setup. Rain dripped in from the doorway behind him, beating on his jacket. "They're all daisy-chained into a power strip wired into the box," he said. "The box feeds into an extension cord out the door. Then the box is likely a relay to cut power and maybe send a surge," Lena said. "You don't have time for a technician, but you don't have to dissect it. You just have to starve it." "In English?" Lucas called from the doorway. "Kill the power," Lena said. "Not with the switch physically. If you can trace the extension cord to where it plugs in outside and yank it, you cut juice to the heaters and the timer. Worst case, you trip a breaker. Best case, everything goes dark and nothing overheats or arcs." 1 minute, 56, Ethan said. "Copy." "Lucas, finish clearing. Yard guy, help him." "Shadow, with me." He backed out of the container, following the thick orange cord that slithered out through a gap in the door. Rain pelted them as they rounded the corner of the car. The cord ran across the gravel into a makeshift junction at the side of a maintenance shed where someone had very illegally spliced it into an outdoor outlet panel. A shadow moved at the edge of Ethan's vision, one of the figures from earlier, yanking at something near the rail switch. "Lucas," Ethan shouted. "Runner, east side, near the office." "I've got him," Lucas yelled back, his boots splashing through puddles. Shadow's attention flicked toward the movement, a growl rumbling in his chest, but Ethan tugged him back to the task. "Later," he murmured. "Right now, we save the people." He grabbed the plug where the extension cord met the panel. Bare wires glinted where someone had stripped them and wrapped them in tape. "Lena," he said, "any chance this thing bites me when I pull it?" "Rubber soles?" she asked. "Yeah. Don't touch the bare copper. Grip the insulated part and yank," she said. "It might spark. Don't let that scare you more than the alternative." "Comforting as always," Ethan muttered. He wrapped his hand around the thick, rubberized body of the plug, braced himself, and pulled hard. For a second, nothing happened. Then, with a brief spit of blue-white sparks and a loud crack from somewhere inside the panel, the yard went abruptly quieter. The distant hum of the heaters vanished. Lights in the maintenance shed flickered, then steadied on backup power. "You're still alive?" Lena's voice asked. "Yeah," Ethan said, exhaling. "Timer?" There was a shout from inside the container. "It's off," Lucas called. "Screen's dead. Heaters are down." Shadow let out a small huff that sounded almost like approval. Ethan keyed the radio again. Device neutralized by power cut. No visible detonation. Securing scene. Backup is 3 minutes out, Maria said in his ear. Yard perimeter is almost sealed. Anyone trying to run is going to have a bad night. As if on cue, a figure burst from behind the office, sprinting toward a chain-link gap near the tracks. Lucas gave chase, water spraying from under his boots. Shadow's muscles bunched as he watched. Go, Ethan said. Shadow shot forward like a released arrow, closing the distance with frightening speed. The runner glanced back just in time to see a blur of tan and black. Moments later, he was on the ground. Shadow latched onto his sleeve, growling deep, holding him in place without breaking skin. Lucas caught up, cuffing the man with one hand while keeping a reassuring grip on Shadow's harness with the other. Nice takedown, Lucas panted. That's teamwork, buddy. Hours later, the yard looked like a different place. Crime scene tape fluttered in the wet wind. Additional units had arrived, lights rotating red and blue across the slick tracks. EMS crews moved quietly among the migrants, handing out blankets and warm drinks. Detectives took statements under hastily assembled awnings. Ethan stood beneath the overhang of the maintenance shed, rain finally losing strength to a mist. Shadow sat at his side, fur damp, tongue lolling slightly from exertion. On the far side of the scene, 2 men in handcuffs sat on the ground, guarded by officers. One was the runner Shadow had brought down. The other had been pulled from the office, his shirt soaked with sweat and rain. Protestations about legitimate charity work, ringing increasingly hollow under the weight of seized manifests and communication logs. Maria's voice came from behind Ethan. Those heaters were about 15 minutes away from cooking those chemicals into something ugly, she said. Lena says we got lucky. Luck had 4 paws tonight, Ethan said. Maria looked down at Shadow, then back at him. We brought Mira in on a secure call, she said. Told her you found the train. She wanted to know if anyone died. And? Ethan asked. She cried when I told her no, Maria said. Then she started naming middlemen she'd seen over the past year. Lena and the detectives are building something big from it. Ethan nodded. Good. You did well, Maria said quietly. You all did. This could have been bad. Ethan watched as one of the younger migrants, maybe 17, maybe younger, accepted a cup of something hot from a paramedic with shaking hands. How many people do you think fell through before tonight? He asked. Maria didn't answer. Shadow nudged his leg gently, as if to remind him he was still there, still solid. Tomorrow's problem, Maria said eventually. Tonight, you stopped the bleeding. Dawn came in, shades of gray and pale blue. By the time Ethan and Shadow got back to the city, the rain had tapered off to a fine mist that hung in the air like breath. The freight terminal was quieter, now fewer engines, more birdsong, the night shift thinning as the day crews began to arrive. Paperwork and debriefs waited inside endless forms, evidence logs, interviews. But for a brief sliver of time, Ethan claimed something else. He walked past the office doors, past the rows of parked patrol cars, and out toward a chain-link fence that bordered the waterfront side of the rail lines. There, someone had bolted a weathered wooden bench, overlooking the tangle of tracks and the narrow slice of harbor beyond. You ever get tired of being right? Ethan asked. Shadow didn't answer, obviously, but he leaned a little more of his weight against Ethan's leg, the canine version of a shrug. Ethan let out a small laugh. The sound surprised him. He hadn't realized how tightly he'd been holding his breath for hours. You know what the thing is that keeps me up? He said. We have scanners that see through steel, sensors that sniff chemicals to parts per million, databases that connect half the world, and they all said that container tonight was just boxes. You ever get tired of being right? Ethan asked. Shadow didn't answer, obviously, but he leaned a little more of his weight against Ethan's leg, the canine version of a shrug. Ethan let out a small laugh. The sound surprised him. He hadn't realized how tightly he'd been holding his breath for hours. You know what the thing is that keeps me up? He said. We have scanners that see through steel, sensors that sniff chemicals to parts per million, databases that connect half the world. And they all said that container tonight was just boxes. He looked down at Shadow. Then you walk by, he said. You stop. You bark. And suddenly the whole story changes. Shadow blinks slowly, watching his face. You don't care what the paint says, Ethan went on. You don't care about logos or charity names or who's wearing a badge. You don't see criminal or victim. You just smell wrong and right, hurt and safe. He glanced back at the terminal buildings, imagining Mira sitting somewhere under soft lights, wrapped in a blanket, finally telling her whole story to someone who wrote it down. They used her, he said, turned her into a mask. If we hadn't looked twice, she'd be the one on the front page tomorrow as the mastermind, and the people behind her would keep on filling boxes. The thought sat heavy in his chest. Maybe that's our job now, he murmured. Not just catching what goes bang, catching the lies about who's holding the match. Shadow rested his chin on Ethan's knee, eyes half closed. His breathing was slow, steady, a metronome for a heart that had done enough racing for one night. You did good, Ethan said, scratching behind his ear. You saw what none of the machines did, what none of us would have believed if you hadn't refused to walk away. He thought of the migrants stepping out into the rain, blinking as if they'd forgotten what open air felt like, of the device's timer going dark, of Mira's cracked voice on the line when she asked, "Did anyone die?" K-Nam, 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 K-Nam. He thought of the way Shadow had stood between her and fear, hers, his, everyone's. You didn't see a smuggler, he said softly. You saw a person in danger. You didn't attack. You warned. That's the difference between force and protection. A freight horn sounded somewhere far down the line, low and mournful. The kind of sound that usually sank right into the bones of the city and disappeared. This morning, it sounded like a promise. Ethan stood reluctantly, stretching aching muscles. Shadow hopped up, shook off the last clinging drops of mist, and trotted a little ahead along the fence line before doubling back to check on him. Come on, partner, Ethan said, heading back toward the precinct doors. They're going to want your picture for the bulletin board. Maybe there'll even be cake. You know how much you hate cake. Shadow's tail wagged at the word, cake or no cake. He didn't understand promotions, commendations, news stories. He understood one thing. Last night, people were in trouble. Now, they weren't. Sometimes Ethan thought that was the only math that really mattered. As they stepped inside, the first rays of real sunlight broke over the tracks, catching on the reflective letters of Shadow's vest. Police. The four letters gleamed for a moment like a simple, stubborn truth. Sometimes heroes wore uniforms. Sometimes they just walked on four paws, guided by nothing more than instinct, loyalty, and a nose that refused to ignore what the world was trying hard not to see.